Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today we are carrying on with our early off-season preview series, taking a look at each of the teams in the NBA and some of the biggest questions that are facing those squads as we head into this off-season free agency period. We are breaking things down as I said, one video for each team in the league, and today's video is going to center on the Sacramento Kings. So we'll just sort of dive right into what was a fantastic season for the Kings, for the city of Sacramento, who had really been waiting for something good to happen with their team for a hell of a long time. They do finally get somewhere. It's a potential building block for the future here for the Kings. But enough rambling. Let's get into some stats for the Kings. You can see it on your screen right now. They go 48 and 34 in the regular season, good enough for the third overall seed in the Western Conference, first place in the Pacific Division. So the Kings do get to hang a division-winning banner in their arena for the first time in literal decades. So some solid stuff for them. Unfortunately, things did go a little bit worse once they hit the playoffs. Despite being that 3 seed and having home court advantage, they go 3-4 in the playoffs, falling in 7 games to the Golden State Warriors in the first round. So the good news is you make it to the playoffs for the first time in nearly 20 years. The bad news is you run into a Warriors squad that was very, very good in terms of their ability to play in those high stakes games, whereas the Kings didn't really have the same sort of playoff experience. So they go down in round one, but we do now get to take a look at some of their statistics. You can see on the screen right now, they were first in the league in the regular season in offensive rating. Unfortunately, that was a little bit counterbalanced by the fact that they were 25th in defensive rating, one of the worst defensive teams in the league. Net rating still puts them at 8th, part of the reason why they got the 3 seed, and 12th in the league in pace while having just the 23rd highest payroll in the league. So one of the highest performances in terms of win-loss total to salary cap ratio. I don't think anyone really tracks that, but they were able to play very well for relatively cheap, which is good for the Kings moving forward, as we will potentially get to. But that is going to do it for the stats. We can take a look really quickly here at the losses and additions to this lineup because it's an incredibly short list. The Kings have basically done nothing to this point in the offseason. They did add a couple of guys in the draft. Colby Jones and Jalen Slauson were both picked up by them. In the losses column, nothing. No one has actually left the team just yet. Okay, hey, everybody. This is Kmart from the future. Just sort of gonna cut in here for something real quick while I was editing this. I realized past me completely and totally forgot that the Sacramento Kings did trade Richaun Holmes on draft night as part of these deals here. I don't know why I forgot. I'm going to continue to reference the fact that they didn't lose any players. That's not true. Richaun Holmes was traded. It should be on the video correctly. Just ignore what I'm saying about it because I'm dumb and I forgot. So, you know, sorry about that. But yeah, back to the video. There was one thing worth noting here for the Kings. One of the draft picks that they picked up, what the Kings gave up in exchange wasn't, I think, fully disclosed just yet. It was one of those sort of Major League Baseball moments where it's a player to be named later. Maybe that player has now been named and I just missed it, but I was looking and I couldn't really find it. If I do find it in the editing process, it'll go in, right here with a message that says that I'm dumb because I didn't find it earlier. But as of right now, the losses column for the Kings is pretty much empty. So is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I honestly don't know just yet, but we'll have to find out. But that does lead us into our first big question here for Sacramento. That question is, do the Kings just try to run it back with what they've got, right? I mean, you take a look at the lineup here. They had one of the best seasons that the franchise has seen in nearly 20 years, bringing new life and new hope to a city that had been, unfortunately, the butt of many, many jokes among NBA fan bases. People always like to just sort of throw shade at the Kings, basically at random intervals. But the team shot up the standings. They did not drop off the way that a lot of people had initially suspected that they would as the season went on, uh, mostly due to the fact that they had the best offense in the league. But the team continued to win. The city got behind them. The light the beam thing turned from a meme into an actual genuine sort of rallying cry for their fan base. And, they finished third in the Western Conference. And while they do end up falling in 7 to the Warriors in the first round, I think a lot of that can be chalked up to the fact that basically no member of this Kings team had any playoff experience to speak of, right? I think Harrison Barnes was really the only exception. So you get late into that series, you get into game 6, game 7, those sort of do or die games, and your players aren't ready for that atmosphere, especially game 6 being on the road. They just weren't quite ready for how big that game was going to be. And for some of the players, not all of them, you could kind of see that a little bit. Some of their players were slow to start. Some of them didn't quite measure up the way that we had expected from them in their previous play in the regular season. So it was a bit unfortunate, but now the team's core has that experience under their belt, and they should be looking to improve and take another shot at the playoffs, right? I mean, they got the 3rd seed. They played well enough in the regular season to secure home court advantage in the first round. That is pretty damn good. And they will have the ability to just, as I said, kind of run it back. Almost all of the team's core is still under contract, save for Harrison Barnes. So the team doesn't really have to do much with their first 5 or 6 guys in order to make another attempt at this. So in terms of their starting lineup, plus maybe their first man off the bench, they are going to look largely the same unless they make a major trade. It's the second unit that's potentially going to have to make some changes. The second and third units, 4 or 5 of their guys off the bench are free agents, guys like Terrence Davis, Trey Lyles, Kessler Edwards, and Chimeze Metu. I really hope I'm pronouncing that one correctly. I am probably not, but all of those guys are potentially going to be free agents, so either spend the money to retain them or go looking for some other cheap alternatives because, I mean, those guys that I just listed off, they didn't score a crazy amount of points. They weren't necessarily vital to the team, but your second unit has to be reliable enough. Maybe they can't win a game by themselves, but they need to be able to hold the line. Either maintain a lead or keep your team within striking distance if you are losing. So having guys that you can rely upon to sort of fill that role is obviously unbelievably important, especially for a Kings squad who were really kind of streaky, right? Best defense or best offense in the league, one of the worst defenses in the league. So in that case, your second unit really does have to keep the offensive momentum going for you because the defense is not going to get anything done. You really do just have to outscore your opponents. But yeah, the main faces of the Kings squad will be back in uniform for the 2023-2024 season, and that might be enough with some minor changes around the edges. We'll have to see. But that brings me to my second point here for the Kings. Not really a question, just more of a statement. And the statement being, the Kings had a fantastic, stellar offense, but no defense whatsoever, and that is something that they need to fix. The Kings were the number 1 offense in the NBA by offensive rating, as we mentioned, but the team's defensive effort just was not as strong, and that was a weakness that we saw exploited pretty definitively by the Warriors in that playoff series. It was basically a situation where you just had to make sure you scored more points than your opponents. And yes, I know that is how every game of basketball works. I'm not John Madden out here. You score more points to win the game. But if your only plan is just we will have to outscore them no matter what, and your defense can't be relied upon to slow that progress down, you are going to struggle against a team like the Warriors who have Steph Curry at the helm. You are not slowing him down. You are not limiting him to less than 20 points. That's not going to happen, and it sure as hell wasn't going to happen in the playoffs. So in the regular season, it did sort of seem to work out, but that's not really great. So the Kings have to sort of shore up their defensive efforts. They were, again, bottom 5 in the league, despite some pretty solid effort from some of their guys, in particular Domantas Sabonis. He honestly played well on both ends of the floor, but we did see some nights when the offense maybe wasn't quite flowing for him, he was able to sort of shift a little bit more of his effort to the defensive end to still try and make contributions, even when his shot wasn't falling. The problem is that he can't do it by himself, even if he's putting all of his effort into the defensive end, and the team had basically no stopping power against their opponents. Just to sort of really kind of stick it to them a little bit more, they were 29th in the league in opposing field goal percentage. They were 26th in the league in opposing three-point percentage. They were 28th in assists allowed per game and 25th in opposing points per game. So they did nothing. This defense was porous at times, and it feels like at least a part of that came from the fact that they had so many young and less experienced players in the lineup. Guys like, for example, Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray, Davion Mitchell, they all saw some pretty extended or extensive playing time. They're all under the age of 25 here, so maybe as they get older, they get more experience at the NBA level. They realize, hey, we do need to make more of a defensive effort. Otherwise, we're just going to be spinning our wheels. It could also do the Kings some good to potentially go looking for some rotational pieces with a more defensive-minded approach, right? We talk about almost to the point of it being a cliche, but the kind of classic 3-and-D guy. In today's NBA, the emphasis is a lot more on the 3 than the D, and for the Kings, it really needs to be the other way around. You do have some shooters on the lineup. Maybe they go out and find one or two more, because honestly, it never really hurts to have more sharpshooters up and down your rotations, but they need guys who can play some defense. Otherwise, all the scoring in the world is not going to work. We had the best offense in the league simply unable to stop anyone. And even looking back historically, you go back to the Steve Nash, the Phoenix Suns, the 7 seconds or less offense. That team was great. They were fun. One of the most exciting teams to ever play the game. No championships. We're never able to really get past it because at the end of the day, offense by itself was not enough. And that's a lesson that the Kings are hopefully going to learn here and try to address. So, they don't even have to get much better, right? I mean, they were 25th in the league. If you can bring that up to league average, right? Go from 25th to 15, 16, then this team is still going to have the same offensive effort, presumably. So all of a sudden, you go from best offense, terrible defense, to best offense, okay defense, and you're going to win a lot more games that were sort of close with that little bit more defensive effort. So we'll see what they do in the offseason to try and address that. It could be bringing in players. It could honestly be just having the coach instill more of a defensive mindset for the players that they do have, because as we mentioned before, they are bringing a lot of the same guys back. So the Kings are a young team. They're a talented team, but they do need to sort of learn those lessons. But that brings us to our third point here, and it's a little bit of a swerve away from what we were talking about before. The question is, are the Kings interested in any big name players like some of the rumors may suggest? This one is, again, like I said, a little bit of a swerve, kind of out there a little bit, but the Kings have been attached to some of the rumors regarding potential free agents or potential trades, but the question is, would they be willing to pull the trigger if someone is available? There were rumors that they were trying to make an offer for Bradley Beal. That situation was weird because he had the no trade clause, so he basically got to pick where he wanted to go. But there are rumors right now that they are one of the teams sort of in talks and inquiring about Paul George potentially. So the Kings are doing their homework. They're doing their due diligence here. They're checking to see if anyone is available and what the price of those players might be. But here's the thing. If the team is looking to make a trade like that, if they are looking to go out and get another big name, unfortunately, a lot of what we just talked about with the two previous points is irrelevant or less relevant, perhaps, right? Because in order to make that kind of trade, assets and salary matching players are going to have to go outwards, right? If you're going to go trade for a Paul George, you have to match his salary. You have to give the Clippers players and picks. So that's going to basically reshape what the Kings look like outside of maybe their core three or two or three guys. Outside of maybe Fox and Sabonis might be the only ones who wouldn't be available to make a move like that. So it gets a little bit strange. Depending on what the move is and what talent is brought in, honestly, that could work fine for the Kings, right? I talked about whether they run it back or not, but if they get the right guy to add in, running it back's not important if that trade genuinely makes you better. They do have a little bit of cap space. Even if they do re-sign Harrison Barnes, he is currently a free agent. Even if they re-sign him to a similar contract to what he had before, they still have some space. If they don't re-sign Harrison Barnes, that space gets significantly bigger. So the Kings will have money and they do have assets. It's just a matter of how much a team is willing to take from them, right? How much will the cost actually be? What players would you have to surrender in order to go out and get your guy? So if the team can manage to part with maybe only one or two of their younger guys and a couple of picks, then I think this works out great, right? If you could bring in a big name and not have to entirely demolish your starting lineup and or your bench rotation, then the Kings are looking pretty good. But I would be hesitant to sell the farm, so to speak, right? To go after a big name but break up the Kings core in the process, because then effectively you've kind of killed your momentum a little bit. This team as constructed is trending in the right direction, right? Third seed in the West, first playoff appearance in something like 17 years. And then to break all of that up to go chase a Paul George or someone of that nature, I feel like that's just resetting. You're back where you started, where you've got one or two star players, but you're not sure if you've built a strong enough roster around them to compete late in the season and into the playoffs. So if they can do it for not even cheap, but if they can do it for reasonable prices, I say go for it. But don't sell everything to go chasing a big name. The Kings have done that or attempted to do that in the past, and it hasn't really worked out fantastically for them. So we'll have to see if the Kings decide to be patient, if the Kings decide to make a conservative approach here to this offseason, to free agency, or if they just go all in for it. But either way, the Kings are in a good spot, right? They came into the playoffs for the first time in a long time with a very young, very talented, but sort of raw lineup, and they got knocked down by the defending champions, by one of the winningest and most experienced teams in the playoffs this last year in the Warriors. That's nothing to be ashamed of. You got to learn from that experience and then try to come back stronger. So here's hoping that the Kings do in fact come back stronger, but this offseason is going to be pivotal for them, not just for the next season, but maybe, down the road here as well, if they want to continue to be at or near the top of the standings, both in the West and in their own division. So that's it. Let me know what you think about the Kings here. Am I on point? Am I completely off base? Have I missed the point of X, Y, or Z? What do you think the Kings should be doing in this off-season period? Let me know what your thoughts are. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.